9 years old. Innocence lost. It's cancer. It's bad, she said. A chicken-sized tumor pecking at my insides. They cut it out. She went to work. Toxic jabs of chemo, then back to work she went. Some families had Christmas. Cancer was our tradition. They cut it out. She went to work. Toxic jabs of chemo, and back to work she went. 21 years old. Grinded down, pain ignored. Out of sight, out of mind, nothing needs to hurt. Merry Christmas. It's cancer. It's bad. They cut it out. She went to work. Toxic jabs of chemo, then back to work she went. 24 years old, I wanted love. Love that would let light through the cracks. Love that would keep it at my door. The army on the horizon. Then, one last Christmas. Broken body, bag of bones. Marching to the emergency room. It's time, the doctor said. Big, thick silence rings through space. 3:37 p.m. The clock stopped. Hottest day of the year, they said. So, basically, when you experience loss, you really only have two options. One, you can sink into a pit of despair, or two, you can get up every morning and fight. My first choice was despair. The only way I knew how to deal was to not deal. It was easier. My writing, which got me through a lot of hard times in the past, wasn't working. I was going round in circles. I couldn't break through. Maybe it was London, with the smell of her wafting around every street corner. Maybe it was my dead-end job writing pointless press releases for a grocery trade magazine. Motherless became my identity. Self-pity soothed me, and self-destruction was my only goal. I'd scour forums reading other women's struggles of losing their mother in the hopes of finding an answer. Obsessively reading horoscopes, so I didn't have to take responsibility for my future. At this point, I didn't have a future. One foot in the past and another semi-present. I was like a deer in headlights. Then, a sea change. I picked up a camera. I put down my pen. I went to the funeral directors, the crematorium, the last places I felt my mom's imprints were. I told them I wanted to take photos. They didn't question me. They let me in. I followed them from chapel to furnace. Watched countless other mothers, fathers, soulmates, first loves take the dead-end road to nothing. I discovered it was Pete who cremated my mother. He loved riding his motorbike and had the kind of laugh that made everyone crack up. He was a nice guy, and this made me feel better. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of a 7-year quest that's brought me here today, standing in front of you. The photos weren't great. They didn't need to be. They got me through the next few years. Next, it was my grandma. My only link to my mother. But more than this, she raised me. While Mum worked, she was the one drawing lines on the doorframe every year as I grew taller. She traced my little chubby baby foot on a scrap of paper and kept the kiddie drawings I made. My mum was too busy. The last time I went to Japan to check on her, she was alone and dying. I naturally picked up my camera. I needed to capture these beautiful moments of light between us as she lay in her hospital bed. The slow process of using the bulky analog Hasselblad helped me digest what was around me. It allowed me to focus on the details of her. She was peaceful, knowing I was near, knowing she was loved. These last few months were the best of my life. She softened. There were times growing up when we'd lock antlers. Much like me, she was a survivor. But this made her fearful of her vulnerability and untrusting of others, often pushing them away before they got the chance to know her properly. She glowed with a radiance that energized me in those last few moments. She was my sun. She was my soulmate. And her truth was that everything she did her way. Something that's been said of me too. After finishing an MA in documentary photography, I moved on from focusing on my own work to writing about the work of others. I became fascinated with other artists' experience of grief and in awe of their ability so seemingly easily to let go. I lapped up every image greedily. Artists like Miyako Ishiuchi, Esther Teichmann, Laura Litinsky, and Rinko Kawauchi. That's my grandma. They were my companions, and their images pieced back together a world I could begin to understand. From stark photojournalism to dark documentary and through to the poetic, the sensitive and the tender, I learned about the lightness and the power of loss. And at a certain point, I felt like it had given me something unexpected. It gave me back my words. For a long time, I had been speechless, unable to articulate our family's history or make sense of it. For me, finding my voice meant I had made it through. Now, as a creative, not only do I write about others' experiences, but also my own. And after all this, what have I learned about survival and creativity? Probably fuck all. But at least more than a TED talk or reading a self-help book. What I do know, though, is that creativity is my savior. Through writing and photography, I now have a language to speak about loss. Expressing it and the impact it has had to show me that vulnerability is a strength. Knowing that everything comes to an end, accepting this, is really the only way to really live, to be alive, awake. So in conclusion, live free, live true, live wild, and choose the tools that lead to progress. Thanks.
Hello. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. I'm going to try and lift the mood a little bit. I want to play you a song that's going to get my talk started. Oh, can we have the...
What song should be on?
I don't hear anything. All right, enough. So, hi, I'm Alex, and the reason I played this song to you is for three reasons. So the first one is, when the song came out in 2001, it had a really powerful message. It was about being independent and standing up for yourself as a woman. And I think today that's still really relevant, in particular in countries where men and women are still not equals. The second one is, I think actually the chorus, and I kind of interrupted it a little bit earlier, I guess, but it still also has a really important message for us as entrepreneurs, because it says, I'm going to keep on trying, I'm going to work harder, and those are all things that make entrepreneurs survivors. And the last reason why I played this song is because it just made you do something that I think is one of the most important virtues that you need as an entrepreneur, and that's the ability to listen. And this might sound really stupid to you. Obviously, we all have ears, right? And you might think, oh, whatever. But the truth is, when you're an entrepreneur, you are incredibly invested emotionally, financially, mentally in the things that you are creating or making. And as a result, it's often really difficult to hear somebody say to you, I think I'm really proud of you, you're trying your best, but it's not good enough. know? So as an entrepreneur, that is something that is very tough to work through because you've poured so much energy and love and tears and sweat into whatever you're creating. And just to give you an example, so for example, when I started Coffee Vine as a business, I was coming out of my last job, I hated working for the man, and I really wanted to try do something for myself on the back of something I had already created, which was a coffee blog. And instead of just going out there and researching my idea and making a business plan and all that sort of stuff, I kind of just went with my gut feel, which is what often entrepreneurs do. And my business partner Eric and I, we sat down, we created this coffee subscription box, and we really loved it. It was beautiful, and we just went out there and started selling it. And we had some mild successes. We sold a couple of thousand boxes. We had a couple of people Instagramming it and whatever. It was really cool. But at the end of the day, it didn't really work. And then we made a couple of terrible decisions. We opened a coffee bar on Light Supply, and despite everybody saying, don't do it, we were like, you don't know anything. Then we launched an online shop for coffee beans, coffee mags, all that sort of stuff. People were saying, you're only 2 people, how are you going to run this coffee shop? We're like, fuck, okay, well, it didn't work, obviously. And instead of listening to people telling us, Alex, Erica, this is a bad idea, we were like, no, we know better because this is our thing. And of course, that's the problem, right? Because very often we think we know better. And that is often the reason why entrepreneurs fail. And these days, luckily, failure is no longer seen as a terrible disaster. It's actually part of your journey. But accepting the fact that you might be failing at what you're doing is very important in order to get where you want to be. So one day Erica came to me and she said, Alex, we need to stop doing this. And I was like, what? And she said, well, it's not working. And this was the most important moment for me, because I actually finally sat down and I listened to her. And she said, look, we can either walk away from this and maintain our pride, or we can go back to the drawing board and we go and listen to what people actually want. And we said, okay, let's try. Because I was also, very proud of what I'd achieved, but it wasn't enough to make it work. So we did that, and in hindsight, it was the most important lesson that I've ever learned. The ability to listen to what people have to say. And often it's negative, and it's very tough to stomach, but it's super important. Today, the Coffee Vine is doing incredibly well. We have, massively increased our profit, even though it's still small. We have sold thousands and thousands of boxes. We ship to more than 40 countries every month. And we constantly listen to what people actually have to say. And this is actually the reason why today I'm standing here, and I'm giving you this little talk, because I feel like as an entrepreneur, that was the most important thing that I could acquire. You can learn Google Analytics, you can be great at writing invoices or whatever, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is the ability to listen to what others tell you and building that into something that can actually help you along your journey. So I'm hoping that, even though this was a very short talk, that I could give you something to take home with you. And don't be afraid if somebody tells you, sorry, but it's not great, because then you can have an opportunity to make it better. And that is my little lesson for you today. Thank you so much.
Hold on, I just need to, there we go. Okay, surviving, yes. For most of you, this photo and these photos make no sense. But for me, this photo and this photo are testament and reminder to me that I can survive anything. And that is not just because I am physically standing here today talking to you. Much more importantly to me is that mentally I'm still intact after both of these 2 events and the impact that they had on my life. I guess the question is, though, what did I survive and what does this all mean? The short answer is burnout. The longer answer is what caused the burnout, and this is my personal definition of burnout. So this is Russia Today's news agency called Roughly, and this is me working at the United Nations General Assembly as one of their field journalists. And the first cause of burnout, in my opinion, is when work is so overwhelming that it impacts your entire life.
and you basically can no longer function. So that happened to me. I was working as a journalist, and it had been a year and a half of hard slog, no holidays, relationships had fallen apart, everything was basically just unraveling before me, and I realized it was no longer tenable, so I quit. Then, what this is a photo of my wedding venue, and the photo on the right is a picture of the centerpieces that I sent to my wedding planner. And so the second cause, I believe, of burnout is another inevitable. So everyone always says there's only two inevitables in life, you live, you die. I think the third inevitable is that sometimes shit's gonna hit the fan. What happened to me, and this is actually the first time I'm telling a very nice stranger audience, is I canceled my wedding 60 days before the event, and I had to then go to work on Monday after canceling my wedding over the weekend. And you can only imagine the kind of impact that has on you professionally. So for me, life is also so overwhelming sometimes that it could also impact your work and cause burnout. So these two events happened, but the way that I survived these are totally different. And there's a big gap in between the first burnout and the second. And I really want to talk to you about kind of the lessons I learned that helped me survive the second burnout, which was the canceling of the wedding, and why I didn't survive the first burnout so well. So because I'm a strategist, please excuse me, but I visualized my burnout. So this is my first one, and the peaks and troughs are normal, that's life. And then you have rock bottom. So rock bottom is kind of like Alice in Wonderland. You fall down the rabbit hole and you hit the bottom so hard it knocks the wind out of you and you just don't know where you are or how to get back up. 3 months later, after quitting my job, I got back up on my own 2 feet, but 3 months is a hell of a long time to feel lost and to feel unsure of yourself and to be unhappy and depressed. And I wasn't working throughout those 3 months because I actually just mentally and physically could not find the will to work. My second burnout, again, hitting rock bottom, but this time it took me 3 weeks, and I still had my job at the end of it. So I guess the question is, and what I want to talk to you about is, how did I go from 3 months to 3 weeks, and how did I lose my job the first time, and how did I keep my job the second time? So this photo should have been indication enough that I was seriously screwed. Because if you look at the first photo, I am nice tan, looking healthy, like there's blood running throughout my veins. In the second photo, I look translucent and like this is, basically I look half dead. And this is only a year in between the first and the second photo. And these are my press pass photos. So I lost my health, both mental and physical, throughout this process. And I didn't really value my health at all. So I would skip doctor's appointments all the time. If the job needed me to be going to film a protest somewhere, I'd be like, I'll just go to the hospital later. It's just minor surgery. It's fine. I'll figure it out. And then I ended up getting gastritis from the anxiety. So it was so severe that my stomach lining had been completely eroded from anxiety. And my boss is actually the one who drove me to the A&E as I'm throwing up in her car. I then excused myself after getting surgery that day and went straight back to work the next morning. So that should have been the indication that something was seriously wrong with my first job, but yet I persevered for another 8 months after the gastritis. And it was actually the realization that I had lost everything in the process of wanting to be the best journalist I could be in providing the news for all of you. I had lost myself. The next important thing is I am not a heart surgeon. No one is going to die because of my job. No one's life is on the line because of my job. I put my life on the line by filming protests in very dangerous situations, but no one else's life in the process is going to actually die. And I think I forget this sometimes. So while I take my job very seriously and I pride myself on being extremely professional, I have to remind myself that if I don't work that 6th weekend or if I give up another holiday, it's really only to punish myself, because no one else is going to, as a result, lose their lives over my consequences of my decision. And I still have to remind myself of that now. The next one is happiness is more valuable than anything monetary. I was 24 at the time when I was working at Russia Today, and they used to give people enormous salaries that were ridiculous beyond belief. And I had so much great money, but the problem was I had no time to spend it, and I had no relationships for it, And the question is, basically, have I not just been bought? And so I kind of felt a little bit like Little Mermaid. I kind of sold my soul for my talents, and I'd lost myself in the process. So I love Disney. And so I kind of felt that I'd lost everything, and I'd basically been bought by someone for my time. So because they paid me so much, they were allowed to ask me not to work over Christmas. They were allowed to pay for my holiday that I was meant to take for the first time in a year and send me off somewhere to report the news. It was fine because they were paying me. And I think that's a big realization now. So I've taken quite a significant pay cut, but the job that I do now, I love 10 times more than the job I was doing back then. Know your legal rights. So this is another really important thing. When I had my professional burnout, I didn't know legally what my employee rights were. And so I thought it was just easier to quit than to fight for it. Other people after me then started actually lawyering up, and they really did get nice packages. They got protected by their employer, and I just never afforded myself that luxury because I thought it was just easier to quit than make a fuss and demand actually what was rightfully mine. The other one is self-awareness is key. So when I had my first burnout, I wasn't very self-aware. I didn't realize and look at the symptoms and say to myself, look, Christiana, you're crying every lunch break. Maybe you're not happy at your job. You are in hospital because of your stress from your job. Maybe it's not right for you. I just kind of thought all of these things were badges of honor and things that you had to go through as an initiation in order to be a real journalist. And I was like, this is going to get me to Syria one day. This is going to get me in the Middle East reporting because I have the balls to make it through no matter how hard things are. And I realized that it wasn't really worth it, because if I wasn't mentally right or physically healthy, then it wasn't really for anything. And so I think that was a big realization for me. And having that self-awareness is how I survived my second burnout. So second burnout, I was a lot more open and honest. I went straight to my employer on the day of the Monday that I came back to work, and I flagged it straight away. I was like, just so you know, this is what's just happened. And she's actually here in the room. I won't identify her, but she's an amazing human. And I went to her and I said, look, wedding's been canceled. I know everyone in this entire office knows about my wedding, but it's done. And she's like, okay, what can I do? That was her first question. She's like, what can I do? Which is the best question your employer can ever ask you. And it leads me then to my second point, which is your employers need to support you as much as you support yourself. So having her ask that first question of what can I do for you was amazing, because then I was like, oh, okay, this is how you can help. So this poor person had to then go around privately meeting everyone in the office while I went off to lunch and telling everyone, the wedding is canceled. No one's allowed to mention it. No one can talk to her about it. No one say a damn word. Like, it's done. And so it was so nice because I didn't have to be the bearer of bad news. I'd already had to do it for my family and cancel everyone's flight tickets. It was a disaster. So the one way that she significantly helped me was first and foremost by telling everyone the wedding had been canceled. The next is she fought for me. So we had an HR department who wasn't so confident that I needed time off. And she was like, no, she's going to need some significant time off. And I think at first they were like, okay, maybe a week. And she was just like, no, she gets 3 weeks paid leave. That's it. She's gone. And they were like, oh, okay. I mean, she's a bit, like, I love her. She's a sassy ballbuster, so I wouldn't ever mess with her. So yeah, they pretty much conceded straight away and gave me the 3 weeks I needed, which is how I got to my second burnout with my job intact, with the 3 weeks off, because I felt like I had the right to take the time off and that no one was going to deem me unprofessional for having basically a life crisis. And finally, and while there's a very tenuous link literally between prostitution and my personal and professional life, there is for me a big lesson in this. I think the sex industry is the only industry where you should get screwed for your job. And I am in the creative industry, so I don't personally think getting screwed for your job is actually okay. And so I think that you really need to set the expectations and the boundaries from the get-go. I think that a lot of people feel so indebted to their employer for their job, for the money they receive for their job, that they never actually feel entitled to say, hey, I can't work another weekend. Or I actually have a doctor's appointment, so I've got to leave this meeting and go. I think we sometimes feel so much like we owe everything to our job for who we are, because we define ourselves so much by our job, that we never feel really entitled to set boundaries. So I think the biggest lesson I learned from both burnouts is that set boundaries. It's okay to say no. No one's going to deem you unprofessional if you have a life crisis or a work crisis. But the most important thing is that after all of this, you say to yourself that you survived, but not just physically, but also mentally. Thank you.